Signature Consultants. Santosh and I have been talking, back and forth for months. I've been to a few of these meetings before, so I recognize some of these names. Just wanted to say hello. I work for Signature Consultants. Obviously, we have an office that just opened up this past summer in Orlando. With this being an Orlando-based .NET user group, we just wanted to start forming a relationship with you guys and see if we might be able to help you or any of your network out in their respective job searches, or if you're ever in between, especially with COVID. A lot of people were sort of in limbo there. So I'm not too much different from many other recruiters. I'm sure with your skill sets, you're getting calls from people like myself, all the time. But just wanted to try to stand out and showcase ourselves. We try to be very relationship based in our approach. That is how we kind of try to separate ourselves from the pack in terms of recruit other recruiters. So if you're ever in between jobs or looking for something new, we have plenty of opportunity here in Orlando. We work with clients like Capco and Darden and Publix. There's plenty of jobs. I'm sure you guys are all fine for the most part, but if for whatever reason you're looking for something new, or of somebody who might, please reach out to me and I'd be happy to help them. But that's pretty much all I got. I mean, I didn't really have a pitch prepared, but I'm happy to be here, to be helping out.
You were supposed to have slides yourself. No, just
yeah,
kidding.
No. I mean,
I'm really kidding. I'm just.
I know. But I appreciate the opportunity here, guys, and really, if you're ever curious about what I'm seeing on my side of the market, I'll throw my phone number in the chat as well as my email. So if you guys need anything, don't be afraid to reach out. I would encourage it.
Okay. Thank you, Caleb. Other ways to connect is to contribute through our OneTug meetup or sponsorship. Signature Consultants have done. And then again, apologize for my twitchy mouse today. Anybody have any announcements? We've got a few other people joining us from the .NET Foundation as well as our usual user group. So I don't know if there's anybody else out there who's got announcements, but or at least I know we had people sign up to the meeting on the .NET Foundation link. So has anybody else got any projects or any major things or something they're excited to see it build particularly?
Yeah, so I want to kind of take a minute to announce, we are doing, like Andy mentioned, we are rebuilding our website on GitHub pages. So reach out to us if you are interested in helping. It's a good experience. If you have experience, that's great. If not, you get to learn, how to use GitHub pages and markup and other things. So that's an announcement I have.
Yes, we were trying to get something for this meeting, but had some issues with that. As a non-web, non-Jekyll, non-Ruby person, but yeah, it was not very friendly from what I found. But at least I figured out a way to get it to work. I just didn't have enough time before the meeting to actually put something together. Anyway, so if there's no other announcements, here's our agenda for. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I can give a quick announcement. So I'm actually a part of a few teams on the .NET Foundation, and more specifically, I want to give a quick shout out and let everyone know that the .NET Virtual User Group is always looking for volunteers. So what we do is many .NET user groups, we know that everyone needs help from time to time when it comes to promoting your events and even hosting by any chance. So there's a lot of us around different time zones that if you sign up as what Santosh did for this event to have it listed on the .NET Virtual User Group page, on the form, if you need help hosting the event, we'll get you set up in StreamYard, and volunteers will take over hosting the event for you and have it streamed on YouTube, etc. So yeah, we're looking for volunteers to handle a lot of the different virtual .NET user group events that most of you may be throwing. So that's something that I wanted to get out there for everyone.
Yes, there's a lot of mix. I'm not going to say the pandemic was good for anything, but it is one of the things that came out of it. But that you could see a lot more cross user group activities. So that's always a good thing. Sorry, now the talking heads are covering the presentation. Let me switch back to the other screen. So we are recording tonight's talk. And it'll be available on YouTube shortly after the meeting. I mean, within a few days, I believe. And then our guest tonight is Jeremy Sinclair, who's going to be talking about bringing your Windows Forms and WPF apps to ARM in light of recent announcements and new technologies coming from Microsoft. So let's see, do we have anything else? Oh, did I skip a slide? No, okay. Or is there multiple? Yes, there's multiple things on here. Okay, well, I didn't realize that, sorry. But yeah, so we have Jeremy's Twitter at Sinclairinator with an O, 0 instead of an O, aka on Twitter. Builds enterprise.NET web apps. He's throwing all the things together, enterprise and .NET and web. I don't know, just trying to be controversial.
Had to throw the buzzwords in.
Yes, there you go. .NET Foundation member and volunteer, as he said. This one I hadn't heard of specifically as a WI MVP, but I guess it's Windows. Oh, there it is on your shirt, Windows Insider MVP, with bleeding edge Windows builds. And he loves Windows on ARM. Okay, you'll have to tell us all about that because it's improved drastically. The first run was not so good, as everybody will say, but we're in a new world. So, and does not like anti-beans. Okay, I'm not sure what that one's about, but
it's a dig at Barry Dorans. He likes to curse me with throwing random images of beans used in ways that they're not supposed to be used.
Okay.
And he likes to see my horrible reactions to them.
Okay, that's
yeah, you would know this if you followed Jeremy on Twitter.
Okay, well, I'll have to investigate this.
Ooh. Burn.
All right, well, I think that's with everything nope, it scrolled off the screen. So I think with everything, then we're ready for, I think because I scrolled, it closed out.
So Jeremy, before we get started, just take a couple of minutes and introduce yourself and kind of talk about how you got to where you are, especially as a Windows Insider MVP. That part to me is very interesting. Like, I'm sure that people want to know how you do that and how you become one of those. And
yeah, that's actually a perfect segue. So before I bring the slides up, as what was explained, I'm Jeremy Sinclair. I currently work at a law firm, or Harrington and Sutcliffe, and there I build enterprise.NET web apps. But on my free time, I do everything completely unrelated to what I do at work. So how I got here and to even talk about being a Windows Insider. So this starts back in the Windows Phone days. So yes, as you can guess, I'm one of those former Windows Phone users. And really during the time that Windows 10 mobile previews and Windows 10 previews came out, I had already kind of been pretty impressed with how Windows Phone 8 and Windows 8 0.1. I'm going to skip past Windows 8 because I didn't really like that too much. But I was impressed with how they worked, and seeing that there was a new OS that looked completely different, I wanted in on it. So Microsoft opened up the Windows Insiders program, and all throughout every single preview, I just used everything, every build, contributed feedback, because I ran into just about every issue that everyone else ran into. But I had a good a bit of experience with troubleshooting, since I have a lot of experience working with the Windows Server, and I've used just about every version of Windows and ran into every blue screen known to man. So I felt like it was perfect for me. I like the rush of troubleshooting an issue, finding some way to pass that info over with even possible workarounds or remedies for it. And so really through all the few years I've been in the program, I've been bringing people on, letting them know about how amazing a program is, the fact that I'm able to get these brand new bleeding edge builds that I know that are likely unstable for most users, but the fact that I can still use the latest and greatest stuff that they're coming out with, that everyone will normally see in like 6 to 8 months. I like that challenge. I like just the fact that I can give my feedback and directly influence the future of Windows. And so I think with kind of all the, let's say, Windows Insider evangelism I've been doing, and especially with Windows on ARM, that's what I believe got me the title of Windows Insider MVP through nomination. Now about the Windows on ARM. So I actually own 2 Windows on ARM devices and 2 Lumia 2520s, which are the Windows 8 RT. I knew a little bit about the Windows 10 on ARM platform when it was announced. I thought it was cool, but as with many people who have lived through the Surface RT and Windows RT days, you immediately had that, I don't know if this is going to work. Well, as luck would have it, my first time at Build 2018, there was a raffle, and I won an Asus NovaGo Windows on ARM laptop. I fell in love with the thing. Immediately, the first thing I did was I enrolled it into at the time it was Windows Insider Fast. So that branch of the Windows Insider program that is very unstable, that was the first thing I threw it in. And I just started using it, and I loved it. The fact that the thing had so much battery life. There'd be times where I could use it really for almost an entire day without a charge. And for what I normally use the laptop for, I could get away with just some of the X86 emulation that the platform provides. But overall, this thing is using the same type of architecture as my phone, like literally my Razr phone that I have, same exact Snapdragon 835 in it. And that's the thing that blew my mind. So it's like my phone and this two-in-one device are this powerful, that gave me my future forward facing, I need to promote this. And so that's what I do, and that's what I've been doing, and now I'm doing it with my Surface Pro X.
Okay.
All right, so are we ready to talk a little bit about a little bit more about the Windows on ARM?
Yeah, let's kick it off.
All right. Let's see, is this sharing? Where did? There we go. Okay. So this is presentations about bringing your Windows Forms and WPF apps to ARM devices. I already gave the introduction to myself, so we can just hop in. As I explained, here's a little bit of the story about Windows on ARM. Actually, what Windows on ARM is full Windows 10 natively running on ARM64 devices. This debuted in 2018, and it's the next iteration of the Windows ARM story, which I briefly spoke about, the Windows RT 8 and 8.1 tablets, which many people know that it was a great start to seeing how Windows could fully run on, the ARM SoC. And unfortunately, didn't get the amount of flame that it should have due to some limitations. Most the prevalent one is not being able to run Windows desktop apps because it was limited to the Windows RT / UWP platform. So these type of applications were specific to Windows 8. They were placed in an app container, and on these particular devices, you couldn't just drag an exe over and run it. So that was a lot of the pain points, and not to mention, you were stuck with .NET Framework ARM32, and there wasn't really much deep support for applications running on that framework. Now, fast forward to Windows 10 on ARM. So there's actually not a .NET framework for ARM64. That was one of the things that kind of threw me a curveball when I first got involved with trying to develop for this, because a lot of developers are used to .NET Framework. But the more I've been back and forth engaging with GitHub and the .NET repos, a lot of the important work for supporting ARM64 is all in .NET Core / .NET 5, .NET 6. And I think that separation from being embedded into Windows was important. But a lot of this kind of weight for the later versions of .NET was simply because many things were just copy, paste, change, like WPF, for instance. At one point, WPF was going to be, I think, developed in .NET Core 3.1 and /5.0, but there were some issues. And the same thing with WinForms. There was actually WinForms worked in .NET 5, but I think there were a lot of issues. And so this is where we are now. I think it's the .NET framework, well, not .NET framework, .NET platform has evolved to the level where you're seeing that parity between the different OSs. Since we finally have cross-platform support, a lot of that code has been optimized. And for me personally, and what I've seen from others, it's pretty much ready for primetime use. Now, so devices running on Windows on ARM. So there's a few devices out there, and you don't really hear much about them. You primarily hear about the Surface Pro X. There's two models. There's the SQ1 and SQ2. They're both based on the Qualcomm Snapdragon platform. So actually, all of these listed down to Samsung Galaxy Book S, they're all Qualcomm Snapdragons. So the same sort of thing powering if you're running Android, mostly you're using the same type of processor in your phone. And that's powering these laptop/tablet 2-in-1 devices that are running Windows 10 natively. Recently, I think over the past day, Parallels actually released an updated version for the Apple M1 devices that allows virtualization of Windows 10 on ARM, well, Windows 10 Insider previews on ARM for to run on those devices. And I know a lot of people are really excited about that because they're seeing, a lot of, they're seeing how impressive it is just to run something that isn't, a native, Intel based Windows 10 OS on the same type of processors that's powering your phones and tablets. They're seeing it run like beautifully. And some of that sort of performance in that efficiency is what you're going to see from this ARM architecture. Now, I want to make a quick note about this because I've been starting to get questions with people asking about is Windows 10 ARM64, is the OS supported on devices like, on Parallels, essentially. So the thing about that, it's not really quote unquote legally supported because Microsoft doesn't license Windows 10 on ARM for anyone. It's only currently licensed, through the OEMs that that install it on the devices like the Pro X, the Asus NovaGo, etc. Now, the only reason that this is possible to work on Parallels is because the Windows Insider team released Hyper-V VMs because just for running VMs on the Pro X and other later Snapdragon devices that support virtualization. So that was kind of the workaround that got them in the door. So that's a very important note. As of now, you won't be able to run a retail build of Windows 10 on ARM virtualized on through Parallels, or even through Boot Camp, for that matter. Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about X86 emulation on ARM. This, I say, is probably one of the most important things.
Jeremy, there's a question from Javi.
Sure, yes.
Yeah, so sorry. So Windows on ARM, I'm assuming you can run it in a Raspberry Pi, am I right?
So yeah, that too. So I forgot to actually add this to the previous slide, but I'd say out of Parallels, Raspberry Pi, and even Windows Phone from the Lumia 950, 950 XL, those are more of the unofficial ways of running Windows on ARM. There's, outside of the Parallels, the Raspberry and Windows Phone tweaks to make those work were kind of community built work.
Yeah.
That did some stuff with firmware, bootloader, etc. to make it happen.
And I got a second question. Is this like a replacement of Windows IoT?
I'd say it's a more complete version. So Windows 10 IoT is more kind of specific, more headless, more kind of half-baked than what Windows 10 on ARM is. So Windows 10 on ARM is like full-blown Windows 10. So the same thing that you'd be running on like a work laptop. That's the same guts that are running on the Windows on ARM devices.
Cool. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. Are there any other questions for? All right. All right. So yeah, the X86 emulation on ARM, probably one of the most important things. So naturally, it allows the X86 32-bit applications to run on Windows 10 on ARM. This was important because Windows 10 on ARM currently suffered the same exact issue as what Windows Phone and the Windows RT suffered: lack of native apps. And this was more or less a simple bridge to get us to where we are. So you can have the Windows 10 on ARM devices. You can run a lot of the x86 applications, because even though you have x64 out there, many vendors offer x86 just because it's still supported and kind of easiest to compile for. And the way that the emulation works is it's the same sort of WoW64 layer that allows x86 applications to run on x64 Windows OS. So it's that similar technology, but there's a few differences. There's a process called the Xda JIT, which it compiles the blocks of code and emulates the x86 instruction set, but optimizes it for running on ARM64. So in a way to compare this, it's similar to what Apple has started to do with the M1 with the Rosetta 2. Same sort of concept. It's translating those layers and emulating. Now for this, it actually caches the code for starter FastUp, which is the Xda Cache service. So typically the first time you run the x86 application, it may run slow, but the second time and any subsequent times, it's going to load faster. And even with the x86 emulation, you can tweak how things are emulated with the compatibility settings, which is actually really cool. So as what you can do with if there's an issue with an older program that's running that was built for like Windows 7 that's not running with Windows 10, you can go into those same settings and tweak how the emulation works. But I personally have never had to use it, but I believe there's some extreme cases where you do want to limit many of the optimizations put in place. Now, a quick bullet point: there is X64 emulation on but only in the Windows Insider Dev channel builds for right now. So anything that's running Windows 10 build 21 XXXX. So it's like the latest one is 21354. No, 2135. I have to see which build. But anything that's in the 2100 levels of builds, those are the only ones that will support running using the X64 emulation, which surprisingly is quite nice in performance. And I believe that even having that sort of emulation makes kind of the bridge of making native ARMS apps easier, because as with anything, you can trust the X86 emulation it's okay. Put it like that. It is okay, and you can see the difference even between loading an X86 browser as opposed to a native ARM browser. But X64 makes it a lot easier for developers to compile applications natively, just faster enough that you're not suffering. Because before there was a lot, before the amount of ARM64 applications available, many time wasted compiling with MS Build 32-bit, and it was not kind of not. You don't want to sit through that. All right, and why do you care about wanting to target ARM natively? Like I said, you get the native performance benefits. And I want to go back to Apple on this one, because it seems like the rush for an acceptance for running an ARM OS, Apple kind of popularized that. Even though Microsoft's had this technology out there for years, once the Apple got on board, you can see the performance with those devices, and especially since Linux has been ahead of the game with ARM64 support, and you're starting to see a lot of that even in the cloud with server loads, things running, people moving to ARM64 to run full-on huge web servers and clusters. The people are really starting to pick up on that efficiency. And another reason is the consistency and availability. As if people are going to create native applications for the platform that they're running their primary work from, it needs to be the same way for ARM devices. So we already have X86, X64. It does get a little disheartening to see, oh, I want this cool app. Oh, it's only X64. Oh, it's X86, and it's going to run slower than this native platform that people can pretty easily build ARM-based native apps for. Okay, so how do we even port WinForms and WPF apps to ARM64? So as I briefly spoke of before, that support is in .NET 6. So at the time, it's still in preview. The latest .NET 6 preview was Preview 3, and it supports all the platforms. And this one's pretty easy to do. There's a .NET tool called Upgrade Assistant, and that was actually debuted during the .NET Conf Focus on Windows. That .NET tool is amazing. It's probably it saves a lot of steps from manually porting .NET Framework projects to .NET 5. It is a lifesaver. So the only issue with that is, currently everything except WinForms and WPF work on ARM64. So if you need to have WinForms and WPF apps working, you have to upgrade the target framework to .NET 6. And so, as I said, it's not supported, but it may be backported to .NET 5, may be backported to ARM64, but I don't really know if it will, given the timeline, since we're going to see at the actual next .NET Conf in November. That's when .NET 6 is live, and we don't have. I don't remember exactly when .NET 5 goes end of life, but I don't know for sure if they're going to take the time to backport that to allow it to work. So that's an important tidbit. And the last simple thing to do is set the runtime identifier to Win ARM64. So you already have Win X86 and Win X64. Same thing with ARM64. Now some tips for targeting ARM64. So if you're using the directory build props.
Hey, Jeremy.
Yeah.
I dropped in the chat a GitHub repo for you for the classic WinForms. So have at it.
Oh, okay. See if I can find this. Okay, I'll have to try this one. So a few tips for targeting the ARM64. Like I said, anything that you have configuration or static directory build props, or even your CS proj file that has X86 and X64, make sure you add ARM64. And another thing I didn't add in here, you really, if you're using Visual Studio, make sure that you're running Visual Studio 2019 previews, because those are what will bring your .NET 6 support, or .NET 6 preview SDK support. If you're just doing console apps, you can just use the regular VS 2019 or do the .NET build from the CLI. Platform targets, same thing. And the CS proj, if you are limiting things to be natively compiled in those platform targets, add ARM64. Otherwise, you're going to compile it and it's not going to work. And another important thing, modify your build scripts and your YAML files. Make sure ARM64 is accounted for in that front. And at that time, you should be good to go. There's not really much you'll run into. The only thing, though, is if you need to test an ARM64 build, you need an ARM64 device. You cannot run ARM64 binaries on an x86 or x64 Windows. So that's another gotcha. But that's only, you can compile for them. So .NET has cross compilation with the SDKs, and even outside of this, there's a lot of I think C++ with I can't even think of the name, like with Clang and LLVM and Cygwin. Those can all cross compile. Now, for the thing that we've all been waiting for, let us ARM64 some apps. Okay. So, hi Dpi Demos. Okay. Let's see if this works. Let's see, what should I do? Should I do this from the X64 or should we do this directly from the Surface Pro X? What do you think?
How about Surface Pro X?
Okay. All right. So this is my Surface Pro X. And oh yeah, there it is. 2.13.59. So this is the latest Windows 10 Dev Insider preview build. And as you see, this is full Windows 10. And I have just about everything on here. I use my Pro X for just about everything. So I have a lot of stuff on here. Okay, so this hi Dpi Demos. Ooh, okay. So this is, let's take a look at this real quick. This looks like a Windows Forms app, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, okay.
That'd be my guess.
All right. So first thing I'll do is clone this. Oh. And this is actually running the X86 version of Git. I think someone actually created a compiled ARM64 version, but I don't believe it's actually released yet. All right. So, that's a lot of stuff. Okay. So first and foremost, I have .NET Core running on here natively. As you see, I'm actually running Preview 4, which is not fully out yet. So this is the latest from the .NET installer repo. And big thanks to the .NET team for creating native ARM64 SDK installers, because previously it was very painful to get it all installed. So a big lifesaver. All right, so first thing we want to do is, let's just try to run this or build it. Oh, I don't have .NET 4.7. Well, this is actually kind of fun because now I can upgrade it to .NET Core. So I'm going to skip a few steps on this. Let me see if I can find this. So I actually had to make a custom build of the what is it, the upgrade assistant, because there is an issue with its ability to locate Visual Studio, which, yes, Visual Studio runs on Windows 10 on ARM, only because the IDE is X86, and most of the other processes are also. I wouldn't recommend using it if you expect ultra speed in the IDE, but if you need to compile a few things, it works. But yeah, there was an issue with the code to find actually the MS build path from Visual Studio installation, because there's another gotcha when it comes to compiling for ARM64. Any native or COM references, those have to be ARM64 also. You can't load or target an x86 or x64 DLL from ARM. It's just not going to load. It's going to give you bad image format. So that's a pretty big gotcha. It's something to watch out for, and especially when it comes to like any controls that, any controls, any pinvoke code that's being done. Make sure if it's not something that's built in with Windows, that there is a native ARM64 version of that DLL. Talk to the control vendors or go back and recompile it yourself. But that's something that you'll get hung up on. Okay, so let's find this upgrade. I do not know where this is located. I have way too much stuff in here. Upgrade assistant. Okay, so I might want to build this again.
So you're currently building the upgrade assistant for running, that will convert this particular repo into ARM64, correct?
Yep.
And so where did maybe I missed it, but where did you download that from?
Yeah, sorry about that. So there is a GitHub repo for the upgrade assistant tool. So it is a .NET tool. So you can run .NET tool -i, .NET tools -g upgrade assistant. And the cool thing about this, it actually uses try convert also. So it pretty much brings all of that down. And it actually guides you through running the tool. It's pretty easy. You run upgrade assistant on a project or solution, and it's set up in a way that it's a wizard. So you target a solution or project. It asks you, what do you want to do? Do you want to upgrade? It checks to see whether any of the APIs in your libraries are supported or not. And it runs all kinds of migrations to basically make it work. And it's really awesome, because the alternative, switching from the old MS Build, or the old CS Prod style, to the MS Build .NET SDK style projects. It's nightmare. And this does all of that. It will even upgrade packages, add NuGet packages that to replace some of the older ones. So it's actually a more of a hands-off process. But yeah, this repository actually guides you through the whole way, tells you like the whole solution structure, how everything's going to work. So it was really cool to test out. Actually,
so the cool part is, you not just for ARM64, we can practically, do this for
anything.
So basically, like, you could start a consultancy that is focused on upgrading, WinForms, classic WinForms to 5.0, and just go to town with that.
Yeah, it takes that pain away, because there's a few tools that existed that helped a lot of the process, but this is kind of a way that puts a lot of the best practices for porting .NET Framework to .NET Core, .NET 5 applications. It puts those best practices into tool form, and it's constantly being updated like daily, which is really nice. And actually, speaking of which, I believe I might have to grab the latest. Oh, I guess I didn't like that too well. Might be easier to just do from here. Just for the sake of time, I will. What I'll do is I'll clone this onto here, run the upgrade, and just copy the files over so we can build it. Okay. Forgot about this folder structure. Okay, so like I said, upgrade assistant, and we can target this solution. So notice that we'll look for the latest MS build based on the .NET SDK you have installed. And so notice all of these steps that it gives you. So step one, you back up the project, convert it to SDK style, go through and clean up the NuGet package references, upgrade the target framework, upgrade them, the packages, and do all kinds of workarounds and fixes that may need to be done when converting from .NET Framework to .NET 5. So the best part about this, by default, if I press enter, it just chooses the first item. So I could press enter, choose a backup path that has a default one, just attaches .backup to the folder. I didn't know there was a log, but yeah. So it backed it up successfully, minus this log file that's currently being used. So step two, convert the project to SDK style. So notice it uses try convert. Now this is another thing. If you're using app config, you will have to do some like massage around that. I believe there's a package that will kind of account for that and try to make a layer and allow the old system configuration namespace to work, but definitely not really supported. All right, so SDK style project, we're good to go. Well, there it is. So if you notice this, yeah, there it is. So there's that package system configuration manager. So there's a package for it. And so notice that it cleaned up and added that in there. And it also adds a .NET Roslyn analyzer for going through and seeing if there's any cluttered code. All right, so the next thing it's going to do is clean up and actually add these packages in. Then next, we're going to upgrade the target framework from .NET Framework 4.7 to .NET 5. And since this is running on Windows, in .NET 5 and .NET 6, you notice there's a different TFM for Windows, and this is specifically for like Windows Forms WPF applications. So the SDK used to be Microsoft .NET SDK Windows Desktop, but what they decided to do is just instead of having that Windows Desktop added to the SDK, it's like split it off into a TFM, and so you can just use Microsoft .NET.SDK and keep things kind of consistent. And another thing, if something happens to go wrong, it's going to tell you. Okay. Successful.
So what are some of the usual issues you see with doing this? Like, what are some trouble spots that you run into while walking through this?
A lot of the, many trouble parts are usually when it comes to packages. If there's some package that is either super old and using a lot of like out of date APIs that don't really translate over properly, or do some like really weird things with pinvoke and calling native native compiled binaries, you'll see a lot of that. You're less likely to run into a lot of those issues with Windows Forms and WPF apps. You get into like the weirdness when it comes to say ASP.NET applications, because this does support that too. It's just I probably wouldn't expect a .NET Framework 1.1 or 2.0 to fully upgrade without at least a few warnings. So I'd say if you're on, I'd say maybe like 4.6.2, if your project is on that, I'd say you have like a higher rate of success if you're not doing anything wild with the way your projects are configured. Okay, so yeah, this is going to upgrade the NuGet packages. Yeah, that's the package. There's that Microsoft Windows compatibility. And so notice it's adding in all the, even removing the old system data set extensions. So it's getting rid of a lot of that stuff. So you notice if this were a ASP.NET framework project, it would try to upgrade namespace imports. So this could be useful to an extent for ASP.NET and VCE. All right, so this one is done. And so since we used the solution, it's going to go through to the next project. All right, I guess that's all it wanted to do. So we'll finalize the upgrade. And ta-da. And so if we were to go into this folder, let's see, we'll just open this in Visual Studio. While it's loading that, if I open up project file, fully upgraded, nice and clean. And if we want to see what the backup like all of this 136 lines of down to 27. Like it doesn't get any better than that. So if we were to, let's see, restore these. Let's debug it. Just to make sure it even works on, yeah, looks like it's going to work on 64-bit. Although I don't know what it was doing. It started and stopped. Wow, you picked the one that stumped me already.
To be fair, there could be broken code that causes this. We don't know if the code, works 100% or it crashes when it loads.
Oh, copy ref assembly. That's Oh, that's interesting. And I wonder if it's probably due to me using this SDK. Well, for fun, let's just switch this over to .NET 6. I might have to file a bug for this. Yeah, I've never seen that before. All right, so .NET restore, .NET run. I have a feeling that it was probably due to this Preview 3 SDK. I do wonder what it's doing though. So it should be running. Oh, good old anti-malware. Saving the day. Yeah, I do not know what this is doing. Oh, so it just blew up again. .NET host model, create app. Okay, I need to, all right, so what I'm gonna do for this, because I do believe it's something with this preview on here for some reason, is I'm going to set this to use the .NET 5 SDK. So we'll just do .NET. And just for this, and I don't know if it's just specifically this project that's causing this. So create a global JSON and then just set it to 5 just to see if it's something weird with the SDK or if there's actually something wrong with the project. All right. So, and we'll switch this back to .NET 5. Okay. So we're in .NET 5. So I'm still wondering what in the world this is doing. I really don't like the just did we trip Defender?
Did you have a different repo that you know for sure?
Wow. Yeah, that's this might actually be an issue with this preview 3 on here because it's having an issue creating the app host. Wow, I've never seen that. Okay, so actually I think I will copy this folder over. Right. I probably made the mistake of doing a copy and paste, but we'll see if it actually works out. I didn't like something. Okay, well, we will do this then. What is this called? It's always right during demo time, when the demo gods are not pleased.
I think it's still pretty cool that you can, take an old app and upgrade it.
Yeah, and that's kind of that's really been one of the fun and intriguing things for me, because my first kind of go at having oh, that's why it thinks it's a virus. So it is Defender. Curse you, Defender. This is not the time to do this. What? I have. Oh, well, yeah, this is obs. We can skip that. My goodness. Huh. I don't know what it didn't like about this.
I mean, it does say perf monitor, which is not exactly the most, non-shady name.
Yeah. All right. Okay, and I'm pretty sure that I set this to .NET 5, so we'll just set this back to .NET 6. And do a .NET restore. Oh, forgot about that. Goodbye, global JSON.
So there's a comment from Juan, and he says he had to take C# code and put it in a brand new project because the solution and CS Proj don't like the new .NET Core format. So does this actually, the upgrade assistant, help with that?
It usually does, and that's why, where I brought up there's a heavy amount of pain from converting things over, because you need like everything upgraded to SDK format for it to work, because it does not like the old project format. Hates it. It will blow up, especially on like .NET 5. Okay, so we're all restored. Let's see if see if it works this time. I still find that. Oh, there we go. Okay, so since this was built with any CPU, by default, it's going to go towards preferred x64. Oh, 64-bit. So this will be running as ARM64. And so if we want to see for sure if this is it, oh, per monitor demo. Yeah, there we go. It is running as ARM64. And so this is all native. And as you see, this was the upgrade assistant. I just ran it, pressed enter all the way through, and simply switched from .NET 5 to .NET 6. And that is all I did.
So yeah, that's pretty awesome. I think previously people had to create like entire projects where you rewrite the code and stuff like that, and now you're just walking through like a console app and it's done.
Yeah, and even so, another cool thing about the fact that I'm running on Windows on ARM, I could do this. And we'll try that. May or may not work. Yeah, it didn't like that. That's my fault because. Oh, okay. I know what I need to do. So since I said I'm running the absolute latest .NET 6 SDK, that's right from the GitHub repository. When you're doing that, you have to actually pull in their NuGet packages for the latest builds. But since we don't really need to do that, and I have the proper version, I'll just tag it to that. So I guess I don't have that version installed. Okay. Well, yeah, we'll do this anyway. So .NET new NuGet config. Oh. Okay, and this is actually how I do a lot of my testing. I get the latest builds. So if you noticed, this is right from main, has every platform on here. Oh, and notice in .NET 6, Mac OS ARM64 is supported, which is great. So this is what I typically do every few days. I'll just download, use the installer. And there's another, I could use the .NET install scripts, but I'm just used to going through here and click on the installer. But they'll tell you for a lot of the preview builds to add the package source into NuGet feed. And since I really don't want to do this for every single, I don't want everything running a full machine NuGet config. I just do it per project that I actually want to use it for. All right, so we have these packages, and we will try this again. And so I will compile an X86 version of the same application and run it. Oh, there it is. And so you notice it says 32-bit now. And to prove that, there you go, X86. And so notice that was a little slower.
Yeah, it's hard to tell if it's my video connection or just the app.
Yeah, for smaller apps, there's you won't really see how horrible it is until you get into more complex apps. Let me think of one. I'm going to maybe I'll show this one. So I had this on here just for demo purposes. So this is the 32-bit version of dnspy. Okay. And wow, that's sure taking a long time. Where is it at? Oh, there it is. Oh, it's still not loaded yet. And so this is really running like at that speed. Okay. Now for the 64-bit version of it. This is ARM64. You can see how fast that ran. And you see how immediate. And that's truly like a lot of the stuff that made my eyes just pop out to see that difference between running something emulated or running it native on this platform. And honestly, in a lot of the cases, I have the same amount of software on my other machines, like my work machine, for instance. And running it on my ARM64 device, it natively loads light years fast. Let's see, there was something else I had running on here too that I want to show. Let's see. Yep. I hope I still have it on here because I was cleaning up space. Debug. Actually, let's see if this runs. So I have ILSpy on here too. So the latest ILSpy, the ILSpy team tweeted that their ILSpy 7 release candidate that it supported .NET 5. So naturally, the first thing I did was I wanted to see if this works on ARM natively. And so that's exactly what I did. I came in here and went through their build steps to see what they had, what was different, if I had to deal with anything. Like I could have, I would have run the upgrade assistant, but it's already .NET 5. So I just went through, and they luckily have a multi platform props file where you put the runtime identifiers that you want it to build for. So that made the process like infinitely easy. So all I did was add .NET 6 in there, run it. And the reason this worked is because it's actually built with any CPU. So it's the typical, I prefer 64-bit, so it's going to run with the ARM64 .NET host. All right, so this is going to be ILSpy on .NET 4.7.2. And that just says .NET 6 ARM64 because that's the branch I named it. And so ILSpy. Heck, I wonder if this is actually even, yeah, X86. So this is .NET Framework version of ILSpy. Now let's switch over to the .NET 6 Windows. And this, yeah, there we go. Yep, ARM64. And so I can literally do everything that I can on x64, x86. I built this. And when I want to say that porting the WinForms and WPF apps, it's significantly easier if it's already on .NET Core 3 or even .NET Core 5, because a lot of that heavy lifting is already there. So it's as simple as let's switch the target to .NET 6, build, run, and that simple. And for actually all of this, since I have the .NET SDK on here, this was all compiled from my ProX. Like the only reason I switched and did the upgrade assistant on my x64 laptop is because I accidentally deleted the compiled binary that I did for this. It was like one of the initial versions of Upgrade Assistant just to make it run with ARM64. But simply, it's not hard at all. And like I said, the only reason it worked out so beautifully is because there was no native targets. So there was no native pinvoke that's looking at x64 or x86 binaries. And so that's what really made this process easy, like I said. So is there anything else we want to try porting over? Or do you want to actually, are there any more questions?
Yeah, I mean, it looks good. I'm wondering, like, other than the issue you stated with pinvoke and other things, what are some things that could trip you up while going through this upgrade process? Like, is there any kind of like, legacy stuff we have to worry about? Because, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, legacy stuff. Another big thing. Don't expect to, and as with anything that you see, even on like .NET Core and .NET 5, it still applies on ARM64. Don't expect to fully run .NET Framework, DLLs, and stuff perfectly, especially if those are in something I ran into. Definitely, if you have a DLL, and most of the time in the build properties, it's just simply saying, hey, we're going to build this for x64 or any CPU. But if you have a DLL that is native, so the platform is set to x64 or etc., you try to load it. Most of the time, you won't see an error. It just won't open. But you'll see the error when it is an event viewer. And another gotcha when it comes to doing this, and especially doing development for this on the Windows ARM64 devices. There's currently a GitHub issue out there, because since I'm on the Windows 10 Insider Previews, the dev channel, I had the X64 emulation. .NET currently doesn't, x64 and ARM64 currently don't coexist easily. So there's a few tricks you have to do, because by default, since these are both 64-bit operating systems, well, 64-bit Windows operating systems, it's when you install into program files, it's still C program files. It's not program files ARM64 or X64, it's program files. So you'll run into the issue of trying of the .NET app host trying to load a DLL from a different architecture, and it won't load. You're running immediately into errors. So that's one thing you have to watch out for. Everything that you're including in a project that you're building, it has to match that architecture. You can't mix and match, especially when it comes to ARM64. You're not mixing and matching anything. If one thing's off, it's going to blow up. And it may or may not tell you, depending on how it's being loaded. And I've run into that a few times. And a lot of the time, it actually takes really going through code and debugging to see, okay, why is it this one little piece failing to load? Because, like I said, even though, if the main process is ARM64, that means anything that's being loaded needs to be ARM64. Same goes with like the DLLs and any assembly loading. If it's trying to even create another process, that process has to be ARM64. That's one of the biggest things that I could see someone running into, is just that little mistake of not making sure all of those align. But other than that, it's fairly easy. And like I said, this process kind of blew my mind, as you saw with the upgrade assistant. I was like, I took the time and let it go through and explain a little bit what the upgrade assistant was doing, but I could have just infinitely pressed enter and be done. Like I would have been done with it. And all I would have had to do was switch from .NET 5 to .NET 6, build it. I could have published it with published the package as Windows ARM64, and then I would have been done. I'd have been on my way. So I'd say in the beginning, prior to .NET 5, .NET 6, and even actually prior to .NET Core 3.1, you were going to run into some pain when it comes to building native applications on the .NET Core for ARM64. This console was already supported, but it gets trickier with more of that integration with a lot of the Windows runtime, for instance. But a lot of that work has been done to make sure that things are consistently built across those different architectures. And I think we're starting to really see a lot of that work towards making sure Windows ARM64 is a part of that story and not just like an afterthought.
Jimmy, you have a question?
Yeah. We're talking a lot about cache and stuff like that. What's the best way to debug this if you run into an issue? Is the only way you can do it is to look at the logs and just kind of make sense of it, or is there other options?
So you can debug with Visual Studio Remote debugging, but as with anything, you still have to have an ARM64 device. And one of the things that is kind of annoying when you know you can install Visual Studio from a Studio on ARM64 device, you can't debug. Can't debug from it. You have to debug to it. So there's so when debugging, I would attach my X64 device, you know, after loading the running the remote debugging agent on ARM64, which another gotcha, they have to be running the same version of the agent. So you more or less have to be the same version of Visual Studio all the way between the two. And debugging went fairly well after that. You would see, you know, the application loading on remotely from there on my device. But another cool thing, the iCore debug interface that pretty much talks to the CLR debugger, you could actually create your own debugging process or debugging server, just like kind of like what OmniSharp does to allow it to work with Visual Studio Code. You can kind of build your own, and it'll work that way if you don't want to go the remote debugging front. And that was actually one of the reasons why I wanted to build DNSpy. It's because DNSpy used that interface. And so I'm able to attach to ARM64 applications and step through it. So I thought that was really cool. Let's see, any other questions?
I don't think so. I think we have about 10 minutes left, so we can, you know, if you have questions, or Jeremy, do you have anything left on the presentation itself, or do you have anything you want to add?
Oh yeah, I actually do. Play from here. Oh yes, I forgot about this one. This is one of the big challenges. Okay, like I said, you need a Windows on ARM device, especially since there's no Windows on ARM CI runners right now. So GitHub Actions, Azure DevOps, like there's nothing, there's no VMs that are, you know, native Windows that you can run this in the cloud infrastructure. So you need a local device right now. Like I'm sure that if you have a Raspberry Pi or something and you play with those little community projects to get Windows 10 on it, you could make something work, but you know, there's nothing supported. And I think it's going to take an eventual Windows server or some sort of infrastructure of Windows on ARM and Azure for that to happen. That's one of like the biggest things missing, is that experience. Because currently what you have to do now is you can build, and you know, 99.8% of the time it build for ARM64 fine on, you know, in GitHub Actions or Azure DevOps, because you can do the cross compilation. But you still need testers to go through and make sure that everything works as it should. Because when it comes to like the runtime related things that aren't caught during compile time, those are the things that always come back to bite you, and it's always the one thing that you least expect. And yeah, like I said, you know, Visual Studio's X86, you can use the console the CLI to .NET CLI to build. That's what I usually do, even on other my x64 device. I use the GUIs just for if I want to really get down and code and make sure everything's flawless. But if I already have something and I want to build it, I'm using the CLI because that's the simplest way. Another thing I want to talk about, especially with Visual Studio, is MS Build. If you're running something that requires a Visual Studio target, well, yeah, a target that's installed with Visual Studio with that MS Build, you're going to have to go to the direct path to MS Build and then run a build from the solution from that way. And I've run into that actually recently, where there's some solutions that have specific targets that aren't .NET Core related targets that come with the SDK. Those extra targets require MS Build, which works out because the Visual Studio MS Build will run the .NET Core or .NET 5, 6 that you have installed on your machine. So that's actually like a good thing. But that's another thing you need to worry about. So those are I kind of talked about some of the challenges throughout, but those were kind of the big ones, especially the testing, because I've talked to and helped many people out with specifically that. And really
one is a question. Visual Studio also runs on Mac OS and Linux, and you can build binaries for those OSs as well, especially a Linux ARM64 platform.
So in terms of Visual Studio on Linux, there isn't really anything there. You have they had like the mono develop, but that's it works, but it's like limited especially in regards if you want to do like mobile application development with Xamarin, for instance, you're not going to get that. But Visual Studio for Mac is the branded version of all of that, but you still even the native version for I guess ARM64, for instance, I think that's later on the roadmap for when it comes to Mac. Now, building for those from Visual Studio on ARM64, I'd probably say don't try it. You're probably better off right now using the x64 devices, because building for like iOS and Mac, for instance, requires you to connect with that Mac and the build agent and all that. You have to be running most like 64-bit, which I haven't fully tried this with the X64 emulation yet to see if it worked, but I don't think it fully will. But I could be wrong. But I'd say it's safe to say until there's a full native version of Visual Studio for Windows that works on ARM64, you're going to run into certain challenges building from it, if that makes any sense, because there's a lot of those extra components that go into building for like Linux, etc. But since for if it's just a .NET Core Console app, for instance, you should be able to build for Mac and Linux if that's what you're referencing, because it does have the cross compilation on that front.
So basically, don't do it.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't. Like, you'll likely run into pain. Let's say, like, if you're doing something simple, like, hey, you want to create a console app, a cross-platform console app, or like ASP.NET Core project, you can pull that off. It will, it has all the what I want to say, the runtime identifier, so it'll actually compile and do all that. Because my blog, it's built in .NET Core 3.1, and I just built it from my Pro X and deployed it. So all that works. But it's just anything that's extra, like you're expecting to build full on, Linux desktop apps and like Mac desktop from VS on ARM64. Yeah, I wouldn't count on that right now. If you're prone to dealing with some suffering, you're gonna run into some suffering on that. But yeah, that's pretty much what I have. I think what I'll do is I do have my Twitter handle on here. I moderate the Service Pro X Reddit community. Mainly, a lot of my purpose is to bring more awareness and trying to get a lot of these bugs worked out for Windows on ARM and Pro X, because there's a lot of stuff coming, as we can see from if you're on the Insider Dev channel builds. There's a lot of stuff coming down. There's especially the X64 emulation on ARM. There's a lot of work being put into making this platform top notch. And as a Windows Insider and Windows Insider MVP, I want to make sure that everyone's heard. And another shameless plug for the Windows Insider MVP: anything, if you're running Insider builds, please, any issue you find, file an entry in Feedback Hub, because those actually do get looked at. There's a lot of the stuff, like a lot of reason I'm MVP is because the amount of feedback and depth that I've put into reproducing like the issues and the details. Like all of that information is very helpful to the team. And even in general, if you're on retail Windows builds, feedback is important. So like I said, I have my GitHub is Snickler, which is my username when I was a moderator on Xda developers, which is kind of where I started off with Windows Phone and Windows Phone development, which is actually how I got into C# development. So it's like ARM started me off with being a C# developer. And my Twitter handle is Sinclairinator with a 0. You'll probably see a lot more with me talking about the Windows on ARM development and like just the random stuff that goes on and what's coming with it. So if you want to see more, follow me there, and you'll likely hear a lot of random excitement around this platform, as I briefly showed how you can expect the performance. So with that said, thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. That was awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been it's been really fun. Let's see, how do I stop